Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, who shows desolate peasants, vassals, rats, weasels. I'm a useful idiot, and today I want to talk about the Obama executive order, which has created the, quote, insider threat program. And this is particularly relevant now because even though it was enacted as a result of the Bradley Manning case, it becomes all the more relevant now that we have the Edward Snowden case. And in fact, all the efforts to ramp up this program have accelerated as a result of the Edward Snowden case. And this was an interesting thread to follow because there's so many things about the Snowden case that just don't add up. Just doesn't make sense in a lot of ways for me that this young man would risk everything, especially such a young man, would risk everything for the rest of his life for an ideal. It's just not the way a lot of people work in this world. And the fact that there's only been 8 or 9 whistleblowers in the national security industry for the last few decades bespeaks that fact. You'd think there would be thousands of people really motivated by those sort of ideals. And in fact, there's only been a handful because the repercussions are so severe. But this is an important point because what are the motivations? What is the agenda behind the Edward Snowden case if it isn't what it appears to be? One of the theories I discussed with one of my commenters, one of my beloved commenters, I might add, is that maybe it's an effort to really clamp down, use this as sort of a false flag incident to clamp down on whistleblowers and leaks and do it ruthlessly. And this certainly bears that out to a certain extent, although not enough to justify this case that I was talking about. But anyway, let's look at this insider threat program. This was just revealed recently in a McClatchy article, and I'll attach that below. But it requires federal employees to keep an eye on each other or face penalties themselves, including criminal charges. So that's pretty substantial. The government has really upped the ante, saying that basically all federal employees in all agencies are potential spies, and not only are they responsible for themselves, they're responsible for their co-workers. And if they don't report suspicious behavior, they could be brought up on criminal charges. And so the police state now expands not just to our own citizenry, but to the very government workers themselves. No surprise there. As I mentioned earlier, this program was launched in October 2011 after the WikiLeaks Bradley Manning case. And the thing that's all the more interesting about it is it extends far beyond national security agencies to include most federal agencies, including, oddly, the Peace Corps, the Social Security Administration, and the Education and Agriculture departments. And the documents that have come out are pretty startling when you look at the details. For example, the Department of Agriculture has an online tutorial called, quote, Treason 101, unquote, and it teaches employees to recognize the psychological profile of potential spies. And this is kind of interesting profiling, sort of Minority Report future crimes. And each agency is going to develop its own guidelines. And some of the things they're looking for are the kind of behavior we see in most workplaces. Stress, divorce, financial problems. They want to do behavioral profiles to say that people that have stress, divorce, financial problems, and odd behavior are to be watched now as potential national security threats. So welcome to the Stasi, Nazi-like police state as the government turns in on itself. I go on further. There's a Defense Security Service online program that lists a wide range of suspicious and reportable activities, including working outside of normal duty hours. Certainly something you want to keep your eye on. And the Defense Department even has a unit that reviews news reports every day for leaks, which is kind of an interesting thing in itself. They have to have a unit that's going to pore over articles. So they're not going to even wait for an article to come out that people may or may not read and potentially wouldn't even be a threat to anyone if nobody's even going to read it. But they're going to pour over all kinds of news articles and social networks to find out who's saying what. And some of the other quotes that are interesting is, quote, hammer this fact home. This is an internal memo. Hammer this fact home. Leaking is tantamount to aiding the enemies of the United States, unquote. And then it goes on to say, quote, any leaks to the media are officially equated with espionage, unquote. So now anybody that complains about their job or doesn't get along with their manager or has financial problems, stress, divorce, they're going to be looked at as potentially indulging in espionage. And much of the language is so broad and vague, just like all these government programs, that it can be applied to a whole range of perceived offenses. So now the government will have, and all the government agencies will have the apparatus to basically go after any disgruntled employee they have, which will be very nice, circumventing government public worker unions and all the regulations. And they can also easily destroy someone's career just by removing their security clearance, and thereby creating career suicide for anybody that challenges their supervisors. And one Pentagon official even said, quote, it's about people's profiles, their approach to work, how they interact with management. Are they looking at salon.com or The Onion during their lunch break, unquote. So this is pretty much spy on your neighbor, rat out your neighbor, and about as Nazi-like as things get. In fact, the Pentagon official that provided that quote wanted to remain anonymous to avoid even being punished for criticizing the program. So that's where we are at in America today. And another good example is each agency is going to develop its own guidelines. And for example, the Pentagon uses language that says the insider threat is, quote, an employee with a clearance who wittingly or unwittingly harms national security interests through unauthorized disclosure, data modification, espionage, terrorism, or kinetic actions resulting in loss or degradation of resources or capabilities. So yeah, how about that? More of that great government language that basically says they can fuck over anybody they want for pretty much any reason they want. And a good example of that is a case study. This is a case study of how it works in the government when you try and use systems to actually make things better. And anybody that's been in a workplace knows how this works. I work in a family-owned chain of grocery stores, and there are corporations out there that have the same mechanism. There's no surprise that the government is too. They don't like people who rock the boat, and all the mid-management suck-ups and all the heads up above that all cover their ass, and that's what a lot of this has to do. So here's the case study. That's a woman named Ilana Greenstein, a former CIA officer who quit the agency after being accused of being a security risk. And one of the things she warns is that you're only going to have people who toe the party line. And she is deadly accurate on that. When you have this kind of toxic work environment where people are spying on each other, you're only going to have people who toe the party line. And once again, that sounds very much like East Germany and Nazi Germany. And Greenstein went on to say she said she became the target of security officials after she raised questions and allegations about mismanagement at the CIA Baghdad operations. And she never leaked her complaints, which included allegations her security chief deleted details about safety risks from her cables. Instead, she used internal systems. So she didn't leak. She used internal systems and all the systems that supposedly are provided and avenues for these employees to address these problems. And instead, once again, she was persecuted. In fact, the CIA brought a criminal case against her after a polygraph revealed she was writing a book. And writing a book is okay as long as the CIA gets to proof it before it's published. But instead, the CIA demanded to see her personal computers, and when they got a hold of them, they erased her entire book. So fortunately, she was able to rewrite the book, and it's been published. So anyway, that's what happens when you go through the normal channels. So in spite of all the rhetoric from Obama and all these other government cretins that they're trying to protect whistleblowers, we know what really happens. And when you look at a system like this too, you have to ask yourself, how about all those private contractors? So they can control all these government workers and threaten them and get them to spy on each other. But how is that going to work with all these private contractors, which there are 5 million who have access to sensitive material? And one also has to point out that in spite of this insider threat program, Snowden succeeded anyway, and likely many other candidates could succeed as well. So there we have it. We have Obama administration as of 2011 creating through executive order a program called Insider Threat, and it's all about silencing everyone in the government, and language so broad and vague that anyone who criticizes the government and its programs is liable and can be ostracized, fired, and prosecuted, and probably even killed, I'm afraid to say. But that is the point that we've come to in this country now. So how about that? Our own government thinks that even everybody in the government is a potential spy. How ironic. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.